Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the changes CCP has made to the economy, as well as their overall plans for the ecosystem of EVE Online. In order to do that, first I'm going to be breaking down the concrete changes that were made to Moon mineral distribution, and reading the dev blog that introduced it, and then I'm going to move on to discussing how I think that fits into the wider picture that CCP elucidated upon in their Ecosystem Outlook dev blog. So when I last talked about the topic of moons in detail, there was still a lot of question marks around exactly what CCP was going to do. We knew that the compressible ores, so Veldspar, Gneiss, Spodumene, those kind of things, were going away, but the changes made to moon ores hadn't been released at that point. From my perspective, there was only two real tacks that CCP could take on this topic, either buffing the mineral output of moon ores, as they are much more difficult to transport due to their lack of compression, and trying to sort of regionalise the mineral markets better, or to just flatten earth their mineral outputs and try and inflict maximum pain on the entire mineral market. And as you might know by now, CCP has chosen to do the latter, completely removing all minerals from all non-R4 moon ores, with R4 moon ores retaining a small amount of pyrite and mexilon. Now I was going to pull up some spreadsheets to try and show just how much this change is going to shift the mineral composition of a moon pool, but quite frankly there's very little point. It goes from showing a lot of numbers to showing a lot of zeros, and that doesn't really explain the impact of anything. And unfortunately, as the latest MER that we have to hand is the one for February, before these changes were implemented, we can't look at that to gain an idea of just how these changes have impacted people's mining or production yet. Even when we do get March and Aprils, those won't show the full impact of the change, as pre-existing moon drilling cycles are allowed to complete with their old expected outcome of ores, including compressibles. This means that we're only going to see how this new paradigm functions when we hit around 60 days from these changes being implemented, in the closing days of March. What we can do though is take a look at how the markets reacted in order to get an idea of what the financial community of EVE thinks that the likely outcome of these changes will be on the availability of minerals. As you can see, there were some insane spikes in the middle of February when these changes were initially announced, but most of them have begun to retrace back to their initial price points, as the supply of them is still relatively strong, with three exceptions. Zydrene and Megasite have continued to spike since that announcement, as it coincided with changes to the constitution of nullsec mining anomalies, which reduced the availability of ABC ores, which in turn refine into these minerals, meaning that the supply there simply wasn't enough to start pushing back down on the price. More interesting and potentially indicative than those two though, is the price of tritanium, which is the major bottleneck resource for T1 and capital production. Whilst supply here was impacted by those same changes, it certainly wasn't on the scale that Zydrene or Megasite experienced, and yet we see the same continuous rise in its price over the past couple of months. This, I think, is likely more to the fact that nullsec is slowing down its export of tritanium-rich ores to highsec, and could serve as a leading indicator for the absolutely insane supply shock that is about to hit the EVE Online economy. Now, thanks to certain events, I've been reading up a decent amount on what the impacts of economic turmoil can be, so I'm going to try and give you my layman's explanation of what a supply shock means to you as a player of EVE Online. Effectively, a supply shock is when something that goes into an economic process, for the purposes of this T1 minerals, becomes less available or more expensive, whilst demand for the output remains the same. This means that the same amount of money is competing for a smaller amount of the end product, and because of that, prices go up as the participants in the market bid more for it. If this supply shock affects something that underpins a large amount of product, the result of the supply shock is that everything goes up in price in a process called inflation, that means that your base currency, in this case ISK, loses value relative to the rest of the market. So when I hear trustworthy people like Dunk Dinkle complaining that a colossal ore site in nullsec no longer provides enough minerals to build a single battleship, I think it's only right to start looking around for whatever the EVE equivalent to gold is in the meantime. If only there was something with the right colour that was universally considered to have some form of intrinsic value. I wonder what that could be. Anyway, with all that said, I think it's high time I just read out the blog so that you can get an understanding of both what exactly has happened and CCP's reasons for doing it. After that, I'll talk a little bit about how this ties into the bigger picture of CCP's ecosystem overhaul, and perhaps add a pinch more speculation on how things are going to turn out. This blog is titled Moon Mineral Distribution Update. Greetings! Last month we announced impending changes to how minerals are distributed across moons in New Eden. Now, when we are getting closer to the actual date when these will be implemented into the game, we wanted to start expanding on the overall plan and explain our reasoning, goals and objectives for this Herculean task of creating a healthier and more dynamic ecosystem. Today we are going to focus on what is changing in terms of moon mineral distribution, and we will follow it up with additional information about the grander plan in the next few days. So, what is changing? All basic ores, so Veldspar, Scordite, Pyroxes, all of those kinds of things, will be removed from moons. In some cases, they have been replaced with moon ore. All basic materials, so Tritanium, Pyrite, Mexilon, Isogen, Noxium, Zydrine and Megasite, will be removed from the refining output of all moon ores, with the following exceptions. Our 4 moons, so bitumens, coesite, sylvite and zeolites, will keep their original yield of pyrite and mexilon, with the tritanium being removed. Moon mining extractions that are currently underway will not be affected by the ore distribution changes. As such, they will give the ores that they promised when the job started. New extractions will pull in from the new ore distributions. We are changing the contents of moon ores, but not basic ores. When you refine moon ores, you won't get basic minerals apart from those detailed in the exceptions above, and this will take effect immediately. Combined, these means that your current pool will give you the same ores you expected at the start, but you will get a different mineral yield than you expected when you end up refining these moon ores. Concerns. We understand that there is a minimum expense, the cost of the structure and the drill, associated with establishing functional moon mining facilities. But since the income was quite generous for quite some time, many moon mining facilities are already beyond the break-even point. The main issue after these changes will be associated with the choice to deploy new structures. We'll be keeping a close eye on the profitability of new moon mining operations and plan further changes accordingly. Future plans. We are planning on increasing the demand for R4 moon goo through the industry read blueprint changes. These don't have a delivery date yet, however. Another ecosystem article is coming very soon, so keep an eye on our channels to make sure you won't miss a thing. In the meantime, we welcome your feedback on the matter on the official EVE Online forums. And CCP did end up producing a ecosystem dev blog which came out 3 days later, and I'll link that in the description so you can take a look yourself. But if you've listened to any of CCP Retati's appearances on Push to Talk, Talking in Stations or Declarations of War, this won't seem particularly like new information to you, as it's basically just going over the same kind of points. Effectively, the intent of this change is to slow down the EVE Online economy, and in doing so, bring the income level of pilots down closer to what CCP considers to be a healthy state, so that there retains some level of scarcity and difficulty in acquiring big-ticket items, like for example supercarriers and titans, which have been proliferated massively over the past 3 to 5 years. Alongside this, there also seems to be an aim to reduce the amount of stockpiles of minerals and ore that exist, so that when a new mineral distribution paradigm is implemented into the game, people can't then use their existing stockpiles to wait and play around with those sorts of things and make profit that way. Although this is something that I don't believe that it's actually going to work out for CCP, as these stockpiles tend not to be market resources, at least in my opinion. They tend to be strategic resources. People have a large backstop of minerals so that they can produce battleships and cruisers and hacks and anything that they're actually using on a day-to-day basis in the event of a war where they couldn't acquire those minerals naturally. You're not going to be able to make it financially beneficial enough for people to get rid of those stockpiles during the shortage period. All you're in fact doing is increasing the value of these stockpiles, and that's going to make people less likely to want to reduce them, at least in my opinion. Still, when I take a step back and just look at these changes in the wider picture, I do have to say that I agree with the intent at the very least, although I'm sure me and CCP would disagree on whether or not it's the amount of ore that's available or the defensive power of the rock wall that's caused the problems in the economy. But what I don't think people are realising just yet is how slow this progression into the economy is going to be of these changes. Because you have to bear in mind the simple length of time it takes to process a lot of minerals and create an end product. You're looking at something like 2 to 3 days at the very minimum. And because producers in EVE, or at least very casual ones, don't look at the cost of their inputs at the time of sale to determine the price, but instead look at the cost of the components before they started the production and then use that to determine their price at the end of it, what we're going to go into is this very, very slow period of prices climbing up. Because of that, we're not really going to see what the new normal is for probably about 90 days. And it's going to be really interesting to see what impact this has on things like production amounts, mining amounts, all those kind of things. And these are just unknowns to us as the general public right now. And then when we finally do reach that new normal and people start to adjust based on how that level of the economy works, we're probably going to see things shaken up immediately again as we enter the redistribution phase, where CCP is going to try and find what variables actually affect the limits of healthy income. And I can't even imagine what that's going to look like when it really hits live. But it's certainly going to be a couple of interesting months when it does. Anyway, that sums up my personal thoughts on this topic, but if you've been experiencing this lately and you want to give me your thoughts on what it's like to experience these changes, an industrialist, a miner, all those kinds of things, please leave them in the comments below. I'd be really interested to hear them. A special thanks as always goes out to our Crassuses, Brood from Northern Coalition, Zolka Lando and Jessica, as well as to our other $5 and above patrons in January Valentine, Big Bada Boom, Czar, Dunk Dinkle, Miss Moses, Kem, the Ashfell Celestial Academy, Closer Canty, Crazy Daisy, Ulrich Bluthers, and Omniscious Shardan. If you want to join them in supporting the channel yourself, you can either check out the Patreon link in the description below, or if you'd like, just share the video with some other people who you think might enjoy it. Until next time, have a good day and fly smart.